Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Stella Lee, and she is the founder of Paradox Learning. It's a consultancy that partners with clients to develop initiatives in digital learning transformation, AI integration, and workforce capability development. I'm really curious to learn more about how she came to founding her consultancy, the work she did before doing so, and also how she works with clients. And we'll probably get into some public speaking stuff too. So welcome to
Sure.
Teach the Geek interview, Stella.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you got a doctorate in computer science. So what was the motivation to do that?
Yeah, that's right. I actually started out in the arts, in fine arts. I was trained as a painter, but I grew up in a household with a dad who loves both art, literature, and tech. And so to me, they are all the same thing. I'm just curious about different disciplines. I always loved creative art, but I also love technology and so I just start pursuing that. And when I finished my bachelor's degree and I finished my master's, and I still felt like my education wasn't complete. So I continue on, and I ended up in computer science because that's the discipline I had a lot of questions and wanted to learn more about. So yeah, to me, it's a natural progression, and it kind of come full circle to me.
I find that a lot of people that get doctorates, their goal is to end up in academia. Was that your
Yeah.
goal, or did you plan on leaving academia?
I wasn't sure when I was a student, and um, I was open. It was one of the option, and in fact, I was in the academic field initially for the first little bit of my career. I was working at colleges, universities, always in digital learning, e-learning, ed tech, that whole domain. But as I did more work, and I realized there were constraints in that things move very slowly. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and it didn't have the best work-life balance. And I felt like I could do more work and have bigger impact if I were to get out of the academic world. And I was also at the same time very curious what goes beyond the ivory tower. So I branched out after I got my doctorate.
Okay. Well, how difficult was it to make that transition out of academia?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I was freaking out because you don't know what you don't know. Um, it was scary, but at the same time, I knew if I didn't go for it, I would regret it later on. And my thinking's always been, okay, what's the worst case scenario, right? If it doesn't work out, it's not like I don't have other skill sets I can fall back on. I can always go back to teaching. I can always go back on doing other things. And so I think having having thought through that and having understood that I could do other things if this doesn't work out really helped me to just move full steam ahead.
All right. And then for the people who are listening or watching our conversation, Stella, and
Yeah.
perhaps they're in that same position in academia, thinking they want to transition
Yeah.
out of it, what advice would you have for them?
I think the academic institution really prime you to think only about academic life. So I think first of all, recognize that it's not the only pathway, and it's getting more and more common nowadays to look at alternative careers. In fact, there are many resources on the web that if you search for alt academic or alt act, I think there are actually lots of blog posts, lots of other people that offer services to help you to think it through. So I think the first is to open to understand you don't always, just because you pursue a terminal degree, a doctoral degree, you don't have to stay in academia. It's not a given. And if you're curious about it, I would encourage you to talk to people that are in the fields doing work that you like to do, like in consulting, in corporate, in government, NGOs, think tank. I think most of the people that have doctoral degrees are well suited in these other career pathways. So explore that, talk to people, job shadow, try it out, take an internship, and to think about how you can change the language, because I think a lot of the times in academic world, the language is so different than in the working world. I think even changing the terminology, so your if you wanted to go into corporate, the corporate people understand that you're talking about the same skill sets without them having to translate that and understand what you mean. If you have research skill, maybe they don't understand the academic research, right? You have to translate that for them and what it means in practice. So
Yeah, I think a big issue that a lot of people have when they're in that position, and being
yeah,
in these PhD programs, is, as you
yeah,
mentioned, it it is geared towards them staying in academia, and many of them think
right.
I'm going to get a tenure track position, but there's
Yeah.
only so many of those for all the people who are graduating with PhDs. So what do you do with all the people who get PhDs and aren't able
Mm.
to get a tenure track position? Then you end up going and getting doing a postdoc, but I mean, how long do you want to do that for? I mean, and and
I
then
know.
and then it's just like, okay, like at some point you want to make money and then start living life, and there's other things that, and if I think schools could really do a much better job of really helping those people figure out, as you mentioned, those alternative career
Yeah.
plans as
Yeah.
being just kind of
Yeah.
placed on themselves.
And also like to just add to that too. Even if you want to stay in the academic world, sometimes the setup is not ideal, right? Because like you saying, there's only limited positions in the world. So you have to move. And sometimes you end up moving to a location that you don't want to live in. And so that's not great, especially if you have a family, you have a partner. A lot of academic people I know end up moving halfway across the world without their spouse. So that's just not the setup, that's ideal when you want a little bit better work-life balance.
Indeed. You mentioned that you had done some work in academia, though, but I
Yeah,
suspect there's other things that you did before founding Paradox Learning. I'm curious to
yeah.
learn more about that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so I started well, I didn't come from a entrepreneurial family, so I didn't even know that was an option, right? So my upbringing is always like you get your education, you become a professional, you get a job. And so that's what I did initially. I actually started out in North Carolina working for an African American women's college called Bennett. And at the time, I was very lucky. I was hired to do websites for the college. So when everybody's doing websites and everybody trying to figure out how we can, use digital technology for teaching and learning and to bring it into the classroom, but also to put learning materials online. So they hired me to do that, and I was the very first person that hold that post. And subsequently with two other academic institutions, two in North Carolina, and I moved to the UK for another opportunity also with the university, was I was the first person that hold that job because they haven't had that position before. So I get to create and define what I do. And with the UK, it was where I kind of have a first taste in workplace learning outside the academic world, because the program in the UK was to create a professional hybrid blended learning qualification for London probation officers. So this is working closely with government as our clients and to create a program that's not just an academic program, but it's a professional qualification. So I found it hugely rewarding, and that kind of got me thinking about, okay, perhaps I can contribute more outside the academic world. So that's kind of lead into my thinking in doing consulting work or doing more work in other domains outside academia.
Excellent. So what prompted you to found Paradox Learning?
Wow, it's a good question. I felt like I kind of stumbled into consulting by accident. I explored the academic career, decided it's not for me. And I then took a corporate job And that's what brought me to Calgary. I was living in Edmonton at the time with another university, still in Alberta, Canada. But then after, 2, 3 years in private sector, I also realized it's hugely constraining. There's a lot of middle management training. It's sometimes treated like just checking through the boxes instead of truly developing and educating your staff or your customers or your partners. It's sometimes more of a lip service or more like, oh, we make sure people are trained on that so we don't have to get into accidents or pay for insurance, right? So I find it less than satisfactory. And also, I felt like my impact was limited. So I just decided that I should get into consulting. And I didn't really know how. I just went and created my own company thinking, okay, I have to figure out how to get clients. And at the same time, I got a random email by the United Nations with International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna asking if I'm interested in doing a consulting project with them. So I kind of stumbled into it without really looking for that. And I think this is back in the days when LinkedIn, a lot of agencies are looking at LinkedIn and funding people. And I just happened to have visibility at the time. And the funny story is, I thought it was a spam email. So I nearly disregarded that until I showed it to my friend. And she's like, no, no, this is legit. You should reply. So that's how I started, and things just snowball from there.
Nice. Well, it's always good to have friends, right?
Yeah, totally. Until I look at your spam folder twice.
Indeed, absolutely. So when it comes to the work that you do with Paradox Learning, how do you work with clients?
It depends. Clients come to me for different reasons, for different problems. So I usually have a discovery call with them just to understand, because sometimes people come and they would describe a problem, and you start having a conversation and you dig a little bit deeper and you're like, no, 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 this is not your problem. It's the other problem, right? Or this problem won't get resolved unless you address this other issue. So a lot of times I start with a discovery call to understand the scope, the resources it takes. If it's realistic, sometimes they also like want you to, do things in a very compressed time frame, with resources that are not available. So, my job is to also give them a realistic picture. They wanted, me to come in with an objective voice, right? And that's what I'm giving them. And also be brutally honest to say, like, I'm very clear on, and I don't take on every project because sometimes I think it's not a good fit, or I think they think I have a different expertise I'm not bringing in. I refer them to my network of consultants, other people, other friends and peers in the field. So I usually try to be very clear and say, this is what I can do for you with this time frame, this budget, and these are things that are our scope. And so from there, we kind of, you always have to iterate a couple of times until we both agree on the project. And from there, it's just consulting work, depending on the nature of the work itself. Some are ongoing, some are kind of one-off, and yeah, and it's just very, very different from needs assessment to project evaluation as an after implementation, to selection of a piece of tech, to do an internal audit of the training activities, to everything else in between.
Got it. Yeah, when it comes to the training, you did mention that a lot of people see it as a box checking exercise. So hopefully the people that get in touch with you, they got in touch with you because they don't see it as such, and they
Yeah,
see it as something that is useful to an
right.
organization. Are there ever instances where that isn't the case after you had started working on the project? And if so, how do you deal with such situations?
That I started and I realized they don't, their heart is not into training. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
what? um well, I mean, do the best you can. Sometimes it's a lot of times really it's down to client education. Um and also it's it's the reality of work. A lot of places are trying to survive, and they might not have the bandwidth to really do training properly. So you always to work within your constraint and giving the constraint, what can you do? And sometimes it's just incremental, just to educate the client to say, hey, this is step one, but here's some opportunity. Perhaps you can do more and give it to them in a way they understand the importance, but they also can manage within their own constraints too, because sometimes they don't have resources. Sometimes they are pressed for timelines. So for me, is always find where there's least resistance and find people that can champion that. There's always someone in your organization that believe in that, even if the organization itself doesn't. And sometimes like there's always the 10%, like there's nothing you can do, and you recognize it in every situation. There's always that tiny percentage that there's nothing you can do, and you just recognize it, and sometimes you just do your work and move on. But most cases there are people that can champion that. Most cases people are open to improving things. So I go with that, and also acknowledge my own limitation, right? I'm just one person, and they hire me to do this piece of work, and if they don't listen, then I've done everything I can, and I just have to kind of distance myself and say I won't, consult again with them. So
Got it. When I first started this podcast and YouTube channel, Stella, it had to do with me being really interested in how people with technical backgrounds address any struggles they have with speaking in front of others. And
yeah,
it all stemmed from my own struggles working as an engineer and having to give presentations and not being all that great at it at first, but ultimately
yeah,
seeing the benefit of getting better at it. So I'm curious with
yeah.
you, is speaking in front of others something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Oh no. Definitely no. Um, I think first we need to recognize public speaking is a skill. Like it's a whole discipline people study, right? It's not something, oh, I can just like pick it up. Like some people are more natural than others, but it's a skill set we can develop. And and it's a discipline in and of itself. Like it's not like it's like anything else. You need to understand what are the best practices, what are the steps that you can get better at it. How do you you know work on it with incremental steps. I was definitely not good. I was horrified. I mean, I feel like most of us are. And I also felt like when I started, everybody would be staring at me and and zero in on the mistakes I made, or just not understanding what I was saying. Um, but then I kind of shifted my perspective on that sense, because at the heart of it, I am an educator. I like to educate. I like to share my knowledge. I like to um, develop community of practice, right? And public speaking is a mean to an end. It's not the mean itself. I don't love, like, it's still up to today. I don't love listening to myself. Like if you send me the recording of the podcast, or worse, like a video, I don't watch it barely. I can't bear to watch myself. I don't know if this is I've heard that actors also have this problem. So but to me it's because I think I got such positive feedback from people that listen to me and say thank you for raising awareness on this topic. Thank you for breaking this down of a very technical subject to I like to talk about speaking to non-tech audience, which is most of the case, is like take a technical subject and explain it simply to people who can understand it and relate and apply it to their world, right? To their work, to their world. And I really appreciate the ability of getting that feedback and say, this really helped me. And so I think if you can focusing on um, the benefit of who's receiving the message, that takes the fear away from you as a presenter, but um, more about the audience, like what their needs are. How can you help them? Is your talk making it better for them? How can I improve on that? So it's taking that focus on me and instead focusing on like why am I doing that and how does it help?
Yeah, 100%. I think another issue that people have when it comes to speaking in front of others is being nervous doing so. So I'm curious,
Yeah,
how do you, well, do you get nervous before presentations? And if so, how do you manage your nerves?
every time. I I think I must have delivered like over 100 presentations by now. I still get that. Like I get the butterfly, my hands get sweaty, and I think there's the psychological, but there's also the very real physical reaction, right? Like I get so I worked some years ago. I actually worked with a speaking coach, and she gave me some exercise to do, like even from moving your muscles in your mouth, and kind of exercising your body to just kind of get that nervous energy out. And I am a very animated speaker. I so I think that helps because I'm like talking with my hands. When I'm on stage, I walk across the stage. So that helps me to think, and it kind of makes like it works for me. It makes me less nervous and to acknowledge the fact that I'm always going to be nervous. Like it doesn't matter. Like at this point, like it's not going to go away, but it's not stopping me either. In fact, it actually gets me excited about wow, like all these people are here and I get to share this message with them. And so that nerve to me, it's kind of like the energy in the room that kind of helped me to speak to them. So kind of reframing and also do some physical exercise like really helps. Like it doesn't matter, like people stretch, people do jumping jacks, people kind of walked around a little bit. I think all those help, and also just acknowledge the fact that like it's there. And it I think it gets better because you recognize like okay, I would get nervous, and then once I get on stage I'm fine. And it's just the pattern, right?
Yeah, I fully agree. And for those of you that are watching or listening to our conversation and are thinking about getting rid of nerves, I firmly believe that nerves are a sign that you care about the
Yeah,
outcome of the presentation. If you're not nervous
like,
about it,
yeah,
you probably don't care about what happens with that presentation. So being nervous is
exactly.
actually it's a good thing. It's just you want to make sure you're able to manage it. You don't want to be on there just sweating profusely and shaking.
Well, I mean, sometimes like I also would like say, oh, like especially I remember after COVID when we didn't go on stage for a couple years, and my first keynote after that, it was actually my first speaking gig after. So it's the first time I've been on stage for like 2 years, right? I actually told people I'm like I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't spoken on stage for 2 years. I'm probably going to trip over a wire, and people laugh and you kind of felt like, okay, like they can relate, right? I haven't put on professional clothes for 2 years and and to be speaking on stage, I have to relearn some of the stuff. So I think sometimes like just acknowledging that and saying it out loud, I think most people can also relate. Like I can't be the only one feel like I'm feeling nervous because this is a big event and lots of people are there. And I hope, I hope I remember all the things I wanted to say. So even just saying that help you to get out, like to get rid of the nerves, I think.
I think you're right about that. When you say something like that and people
Yeah.
laugh, you start to think they don't want to see me fail. They they,
Yep.
they want to see me succeed. And if you think that, then you'll think I'm gonna do the best that I can with this presentation, and we're gonna see how it goes, as opposed to, oh no, I haven't presented in 2 years, and this is gonna go terribly. So I
Yeah.
firmly the reframe I think is smart to do. So when it comes to speaking in front of others, Stella, for the people who
Yeah.
are watching and listening to our conversation, and they say to themselves, this is something I want to get better at. What is the
Mhm.
first thing that you would suggest they work on?
Well, there's no two ways about it. You have to practice, right? Get more speaking gigs. I think the more experience you have, the better. Um, I like working with my speaking coach for a little bit because that also you get professional feedback. Um, or just, there are so many groups now online. If you want to just like be at home and practice that, even having a podcast with you, that helps, right? Like there's so many podcasts you can be invited to or do your own thing. Uh, I think nowadays the barrier to speaking is so low. Anybody can set something up quickly. Anybody that belongs to a professional organization um, gets support there, but it also have opportunity to speak. I never thought I would do speaking on a regular basis. Honestly, it is not a professional goal of mine. In fact, I was slightly avoiding it at the beginning of my career. As you imagine, when you're in your 20s, it's horrifying. And you also felt like you don't know enough. I think getting over the imposter syndrome is another hurdle to reframe. Um, Leverage your peer group either professionally or personally. There's always, even giving a toast at a birthday party, right? Um, People would cheer for you. Like you were saying, they want you to be successful. They're not there to put you down. So leverage those opportunities and ask for feedback. If you're invited to speak at a professional event or even within your own company, ask your colleagues, ask your attendees, ask the organizers that invite you. Oftentimes at presentations, at conferences, they have evaluation. Don't be afraid to look at them. They are all, suggestions. So, like, they might not always be useful, but you can always think about, oh, am I being am I using too many acronyms that people don't understand, or am I not explaining a concept clearly? Is this too dry? Do I not give people exercise or pauses to ask questions? Even just the pacing, the format, and also it's different, right? When you're talking to a group of 5 people and when you talk to a group of 5,000, there are different techniques and strategies as well. So look for those opportunities, but also think about it as it's just like anything else, it's work in progress. You don't have to nail it right away. We can always work on so many things.
Yep, practice makes progress. That is for sure. I really like your point about being a guest on podcasts to help in getting better at speaking in front of
Yeah.
others. Actually, I wrote a whole article on the subject about a few months ago. And you're right, it's a low pressure way
Yep.
to speak in front of other people and speak extemporaneously since as you know, I didn't give you the questions beforehand, so
Yep.
you're
Yeah.
answering the questions in
Winging
real
it.
time. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're
Well,
ringing
can
it.
you share your blog post with me now? I would love to read it.
Oh yeah, yeah, I absolutely can share that, and I may very well put it in the show notes too, so other people can read it as well.
Perfect.
And then also you mentioned you not or avoiding speaking at first when you first started working, and I can definitely relate to that too. And I speak a lot about that when I give presentations. I was absolutely a, that engineer that avoided giving presentations, and I didn't have to do so in my first job, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was in my second job where I had to do it, and it wasn't something that I was looking to do. It was this is part of your job, do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And when I first started doing it, it was not good. It was really bad. But I got a lot better at it over time.
Yeah.
And then I thought, maybe if I had started working on this sooner, maybe I'd been further along, but better late than never. So yeah.
No, we've all been there. I felt the same way. I mean, if I started earlier, but you know what? Like we all have different journey and we are all good at different things, but that doesn't mean we can't improve on other things, right? I feel privileged that I've been given the opportunity to present and to talk with others. And so it's coming from that privileged position that how I can help and get better at it. But
That's
yeah,
good.
I relate with you. I felt I felt terrible at it too. But then I also came from an academic background whereby academic conferences presentations are usually no good, like very dry. People like bring a stack of paper and they read it, right? So I felt like, okay, like that's how I started. And we all come a long way and acknowledge that as well. So
Yep, 100%. This has been a great conversation, Stella. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
thanks for having me. As you know, I run paradoxlearning.com, so I'm Stella at paradoxlearning.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I believe my handle is Stella L. Would you put that in the show notes for people who wanted to get in touch with me? Because I do post a log of my thoughts, resources, ideas on LinkedIn, as well as on my blog posts. So feel free to reach out and say hello.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Stella.
Bye, Neil.